Imagine committing a murder and getting away with it. Not for a few weeks, not for a few years, but for more than 6 decades. Police couldn't find you. Detectives couldn't identify you. And eventually, most people forgot the crime ever happened. But there was one problem. The evidence never forgot. Montana, January 1956, a quiet winter night. 2 teenagers, 18-year-old Patricia Kalitzke and her boyfriend, Duane Bogle, left town together. Neither of them ever came home. Days later, their bodies were discovered in a remote area. The news shocked the entire community. Who would do something like this? And why? Investigators searched for answers. They interviewed witnesses, followed leads, collected evidence, but every trail ended the same way. Nowhere. Months became years. Years became decades. The case slowly turned into a mystery nobody could solve. Many believed the killer would never be identified, that this crime would remain buried forever. But hidden among the evidence was a clue so powerful, it would eventually survive longer than every detective on the case. And decades later, that tiny clue would point investigators toward a man no one was looking for. What detectives discovered next would completely change the investigation and reveal why this killer stayed hidden for 65 years. For 65 years, the killer remained invisible. No arrests, no confessions, no answers. But what if the evidence collected in 1956 was actually enough to solve the case all along? The problem was, the technology didn't exist yet. Back in the 1950s, detectives could only do so much. DNA testing hadn't been invented, computers couldn't compare genetic profiles, and forensic genealogy, no one had even imagined it. So the evidence was stored away, year after year, decade after decade, waiting. Then, something extraordinary happened. In the 21st century, investigators reopened the case, not because they had a new witness, not because someone confessed, but because science had changed. The same evidence collected decades earlier was examined again. This time, experts were able to create a DNA profile from material left at the crime scene. For the first time, the killer had left behind a genetic fingerprint. But there was a problem. The DNA didn't match anyone in law enforcement databases. It was as if the suspect had never existed. No criminal record, no obvious suspect, nothing. The investigation appeared stuck once again, until detectives decided to try a technique that had already shocked the world. The same method used to identify criminals who had hidden for decades. A method capable of finding someone without ever testing their DNA directly. And when the results came back, investigators realized they weren't searching for one person anymore. They were searching through an entire family tree. What happened next sounds almost impossible, because the trail leading to the killer began with people who had never even met him. Imagine being identified, not because of your own DNA, but because of a distant relative you've never met. That's exactly what investigators hoped would happen. Using forensic genealogy, experts uploaded the unknown DNA profile and began searching for genetic connections, not suspects, relatives, cousins, distant family members, people who had absolutely nothing to do with the crime. At first, the matches were weak. A few names, a few possible connections, nothing that pointed directly to a killer. But with each new branch of the family tree, the circle became smaller. Genealogists spent months tracing births, marriages, deaths, and family records. Slowly, a picture began to emerge. One family line kept appearing again and again, and at the center of it was a man, Kenneth Gould. The name meant almost nothing to the public. He wasn't a famous criminal. He wasn't on any wanted list. In fact, he had been dead for years, which raised a shocking question. Had investigators finally found their killer only after he was already gone? To find out, they needed proof, real proof, not theories, not family trees, DNA. And what detectives did next would either solve a 65-year mystery or send the entire investigation back to square one. The problem was, their prime suspect was dead. So how do you collect DNA from someone who can no longer give it?
Their suspect was dead. No interview, no interrogation, no confession, and no way to simply ask for a DNA sample. For most investigations, that would have been the end. But detectives weren't ready to stop. If they couldn't get DNA from the suspect, they would have to find it somewhere else. Investigators began tracking down surviving relatives, carefully comparing genetic markers, looking for evidence strong enough to connect one man to a crime committed in 1956. It was a painstaking process. Every result raised new questions. Every answer had to be verified because after 65 years, one mistake could destroy the entire case. Then came the breakthrough. The DNA evidence from the crime scene matched what investigators would expect if their suspect was indeed Kenneth Gould. Suddenly, the pieces started fitting together. His age, his location, his connection to the area, the family tree, the DNA. For the first time in more than 6 decades, detectives believed they finally knew who had committed the murders of Patricia and Duane. A mystery that had haunted Montana since the 1950s was finally beginning to unravel. But solving the case created a different problem, a disturbing one, because the man investigators identified had never been arrested, never stood trial, and never faced a jury, which left many people asking, was justice really served, or had the truth arrived too late? When the announcement was finally made, families, investigators, and an entire community were forced to confront a question that had no easy answer.
When investigators finally revealed the name, the reaction wasn't what many expected. There were no flashing police lights, no dramatic arrest, no courtroom verdict, because the man they believed committed the crime was already gone. For the families of Patricia Kalitzke and Duane Bogle, the announcement brought mixed emotions. On one hand, they finally had an answer, a name, a suspect, a direction, something generations before them never received. But on the other hand, there would be no trial, no cross-examination, no chance to hear the suspect explain himself. For 65 years, people had wondered what happened that night in 1956. And now, even with the mystery largely solved, some questions would remain forever. Investigators acknowledged that reality. They couldn't travel back in time. They couldn't arrest a dead man, but they could do something important. They could give the victims their names back, and they could tell the world that the case had not been forgotten, that every piece of evidence mattered, even evidence collected decades before modern DNA technology existed. In many ways, this wasn't just a story about a killer. It was a story about time, about patience, and about how the truth can survive long after the people involved are gone. A tiny trace of DNA, preserved through generations, had succeeded where countless investigations had failed. And because of that, one of America's oldest cold cases finally had an answer. But the most incredible part of this story is what it means for thousands of other unsolved cases still sitting in evidence rooms today. Because if a murder from 1956 could be solved after 65 years, how many other killers are still waiting to be discovered? This case proves something chilling. Time does not erase crime. It only hides it. For 65 years, this case sat silently in an evidence file, forgotten by most, but never truly gone. Because DNA doesn't forget, people do. But science doesn't. And somewhere in Montana, the families of Patricia Kalitzke and Duane Bogle finally got what they waited decades for, an answer. Even if it came too late for justice in a courtroom, it came in the form of truth. But here's the terrifying question investigators are now asking. If one case from 1956 can be solved after half a century, how many killers are still walking free right now, thinking they've already won? How many cold cases are still waiting for science to catch up? Because every year, technology gets better, DNA gets sharper, and the past gets closer. And maybe, just maybe, the next knock on the door is already being prepared. If you want more real, unsolved mysteries that were later solved, subscribe, because some stories don't end. They just wait.